Hi, folks, and welcome back to the Star Wars Library, where Star Wars is in print, and we have finally made it to Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, or at least the novelization. And this is it right here. So, this is the novelization of The Empire Strikes Back, which was written by Donald F. Glut. He is the author for this. Now, this book was originally released in paperback, and later on it was in hardback. The original copy was a pretty small novel, about the size of Splinter of the Mind's Eye, if you remember what that book looked like on our show. And it was in paperback, and it was the original movie poster of like Han and Leia doing like the dip, or whatever you want to call it. And then, of course, later on hardback, it was the same thing. Now, this is the cover that was released with when the OT was released in the like I said in the New Hope review, when they were released with the digitally remastered THX sound, and also the original theatrical cut one last time. And from then on, you were getting these special edition cuts. But these covers, this is just a side note too. The covers with like the New Hope, Empire, and Vader, or Return of the Jedi covers with Vader, the Stormtrooper, and Yoda. These are the covers that I grew up with. So when my parents showed me the trilogy, these were the covers that I first saw. And so I adore these covers because, again, it just brings me back to when I first saw the OT. So it's a later pressing. If you pick it up now, you might find some art, like some throwback art. I think the most popular covers are the DVD covers from 2004 that they have. So this is really easy to go find. So, I said in the A New Hope review that the novelizations for the original trilogy were probably not as good as, say, the novelizations for the prequels. And we'll get to the prequel novelizations eventually, right? And I can't wait to talk about those. And I stand by that. I still think that the prequel novelizations were better than the movies, in fact. Now, I love the prequels, but I do think that the books, or the novelizations at least, helped expand more on it. Just like I typically think that books are better than the movie, right? Unfortunately, with the OT novelizations, there really isn't a whole lot extra that is added to the lore. It's not really expanded. Now, I will say, and again, I think I've said it in the New Hope review, and I'll say it here, so spoilers, I guess, about my opinion on the OT novels, but I think that Jedi is the best, Empire's the second, and then A New Hope is the weakest. Pretty much because A New Hope is pretty much just an adaptation of the film. I mean, if you've seen the movie, you've seen this. This does do a little bit more for the lore, but we'll get into that. So, some oddities, though, that are present in this book, or in this novelization of the film. Yoda is described as blue. Now, in early concept art or early script things, Yoda was originally thought of as blue. You know, and you can make that excuse of, you know, like, well, they weren't finalizing on Yoda's, color yet. So, okay, fine, we'll give that one a pass. Darth Vader's lightsaber is actually described as blue. That's a little strange, right? It's like, how, like, have you not seen Episode 4? But it's really, again, really strange that Darth Vader's lightsaber is described as blue. The other big thing, pardon me, this is probably the most glaring thing, is Derek Hobby Cliffin from Rogue Squadron. Luke mentions him in the movie. He's like, Hobby, are you still with me? And of course, he's a well-known person in Rogue Squadron. He is described or shown as to die because he slams a snowspeeder into an AT-AT. And it also seemingly kills General Veers in this as well. But in the movie, we never see him die. And then, of course, he's brought back in the X-Wing novels. So it's kind of like, whoa, I thought he was dead. Well, since he didn't die in the movie, basically he stayed alive. The film is always going to trump the novelization in this case. So, again, in terms of our hierarchy, film beats novel. And so he's alive. There are some just a few differences. For example, some extended scenes, which is kind of cool. We get to see more of Luke training on Dagobah, which I think is definitely necessary. I remember having a conversation with my dad the other day, and he was kind of complaining that, which interesting enough, my dad was a teenager when these movies came out, and he was telling me how much he hated Empire Strikes Back, which is kind of interesting, right? Um, but one of the reasons is that he said he didn't like it is because he's like, "Where's Luke? Like Luke's not getting training. Like what's going on?" And I was able to point to this and say, "Well, in the lore, he did train for much much longer than what was shown on screen." But I do think that is one of the flaws with the film, or one of the few flaws I think the film has. Anyways, so that's really cool. There's also, you get to learn more about Echo Base, kind of how that's set up. You get to see more on that. Um, Another difference that's kind of interesting is in the carbon freezing chamber when Leia tells Han that she loves you or loves him. She says something like "I love you," and then she goes, "I couldn't admit it before, but I wanted to say it now." And Han says, "I love you too," but or no, he says, "Better, well, please hang on to that because I'll be back," which is kind of interesting. Apparently, in the original script, it was like, "I love you," and then he says, "I love you too," and then in the revision, he said that. And this is what they're going off of. I think they're going off of like, I think the last draft, Leigh Brackett still gets script screenwriting credit. But if you read into it, like Leigh Brackett wrote a draft with Lawrence Kasdan, and then George Lucas pretty much went back and rewrote the script with Lawrence Kasdan, but gave Leigh Brackett the credit because he felt as though he wouldn't get to this point without that. So I think in that revision, that was when Han said, "Don't, well, hang on to that, I'll be back." Well, we all know that Harrison Ford famously ad-libbed the line, "I know." So it's just kind of interesting there to see that before the ad-lib, this is, what originally Han was going to say. So to conclude this, what did I think of the Empire Strikes Back novelization? Here's the thing. I think it's a good read. Like I said, I think that it's in terms of novelization, it's better than Episode 4. You get to see a little bit more of the lore. It expands on it a little bit more, which I appreciate. If you're going to turn a movie into a novel, you need to, make me care, okay? Like, convince me, like, okay, this is why we did it. And I think they did a pretty decent good job. I think Donald F. Gluck did a decent job, and I think he, did well here. I enjoy this novel, and I think it might be worth your time. Is it essential to read, though? No. I would say, just like I said with A New Hope, watch the movie. The movie is going to be the better product and more worth your time. But I think after seeing the movie, it might be cool to go read this, because I think it would be a good way to kind of, show more of the layers and kind of peel back in terms of the movie, and seeing more of this galaxy and seeing more of the lore. So I know I would definitely say, watch the movie. But I think this is a good companion piece to the film. So that's all the time I have for today, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you next time.